want me on your ship if we're sailing into do battle. And that which was like a pebble dropping in a puddle can become a meteor in an ocean. I don't know how I'm gonna die, but I know how I'm not going to die. And that is via great white shark.
Drop. Davidson, welcome to the show.
Wow, that's a very official entry.
Yeah, the whole tone of voice just changed.
It did. Let's get very serious.
No
more Tom Green talk.
I want to know your bear story.
Okay,
we got to get to the bear story.
Yeah, we have to circle back to the bear story, and so when I started as a professor at Springfield College, like I remember getting the call where I was told like, hey, you're being hired for this position. And like, I don't think I've ever been that elated with joy, because this was like, that is the pinnacle in some ways for me of
How old were you?
I was, let me think. I think I had just turned 31 years old.
Cool.
And, I had been on a really nice upward trajectory through my 20s and like 30. And I I just kind of got the career of my dreams. Like, this is the cradle of coaches. I'm going to be the assistant director of strength and conditioning. Like, I'm going to work with all the.
And this was an elite program. Like, Springfield's like a really great strength and conditioning program.
And I was just like, man, this is it. Like, I can't believe like I've made it. I've really made it with my life. And when I got there, it just didn't, it's like
didn't live up to
the threads weren't lining up, it was kind of coming apart at the seams, and like very early. And this was the first indicator for me that it probably wasn't going to work out. So I was teaching the class exercise testing and prescription for special populations. And in the textbook, I'm just kind of following the order of the chapters. There's one chapter that is on exercise for children, and then the next chapter, oddly enough, swings to exercise for geriatrics and kind of gets into the physiology of aging and dying and things like that. Anyways, it would always be where I was finishing the children's lecture, and then I would start the aging lecture at the end of that same one. So I had about 10 minutes left in this particular class, and I always sort of taught it the same way because I had taught this course previously at a previous college as well. Anyways, it's not enough time to really do anything substantial with the physiology or the exercise related stuff. So I would always just go with this particular anecdote. And I know for me, I don't know how I'm going to die, but I know how I'm not going to die. And that is via great white shark. Like, absolutely no way am I dying by great white shark killing me, because that's the worst case scenario to me. I'm out of my element. I'm just bobbing in the water. And this 20-foot long, 5,000 pound freight train with teeth.
Killing machine.
Yeah, like literally, no thank you. Like and it's not even so much its physicality, it's its lack of emotionality. Okay, it's just this dark eye, like I feel like, Quint from Jaws, all of a sudden I'm bobbing up and down in the water. It's doll's eye, but it's silent. Have you ever thought about this? Like, it doesn't have like a larynx or a voice box. It doesn't make noise. It just is silently going to come up to me and eviscerate me in the salt water. And I don't know if I mean anything to this animal. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand it. It's so different from me because it's a fish, and like from an evolutionary timeline perspective, it's so primitive. And, so if I'm going to die via large predator, I would much prefer something like a grizzly bear, okay? Because I can relate to this creature. Like, it's got a territorial element to it, and it probably gets angry seeing like another male mammal like in its space, and like, it's going to be angry, and it's going to roar, and I'm going to see some emotion in its eyes. So I personally, if I'm going to be killed by something, would vastly prefer it to be mauling by bear compared to just absolutely being shredded by shark. So anyways, I tell this as the end.
This was your anecdote. By the way, I love the way that your mind works.
Right. This is how we lead into dying.
I need a noble animal, and I need a real fight between mammals that understand each other, and that is a way that I'm willing to die by a creature. But
anyways, the following day, I'm going to teach a class or whatever. I'm in the hallway and I see the department chair, and she's like, so can I have a word with you for a minute? I was like, yeah, sure. By the way, this is like week 3 or something, you know, first year. I'm like, oh, she just wants to check up on me, see how everything's going, blah, blah, blah. So I'm in her office and she's like, how's everything going? You all right? And I was like, yeah, I'm doing great. So far, I'm loving it. And she's like, yeah, so I wanted to talk to you about something. What's this about dying by bears? And I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, it's just this story I tell in the aging lecture. Like, it's just kind of a funny joke, you know? She's like, well, I don't find anything that funny about it. I don't understand why it's in your exercise testing and prescriptions class. Yeah, it was brought to my attention by a girl who raised a complaint against you. Apparently her uncle was mauled by a bear this past summer, and she was highly offended by this story. And I was just like,
oops.
Like I was so confused by this. And I was like, God damn it. Like, what are the chances?
Yeah, the odds that you had someone in your class.
Yeah, my bizarre brain just kind of like spitting out this story like on the fly, like happens to correspond exactly with this girl's poorly timed uncle bear mauling thing. But it was just like, oh my God, like the odds of that are so infinitesimal. And yet it's already like being brought up as a formal complaint about me at this school. I'm like, man, this is probably, and it was a good indicator that things were not going to end that well.
What do you think is going to happen with colleges, with schools? Because this is the problem that you're articulating is a real problem, and it's getting like worse and worse. Yeah. Professors can't say anything, and they don't want to do it. Like there's less and less professors that want to do that job.
Last thing I expected was like that to be an issue. You know what I mean? It's like such a harmless,
you're trying to teach kids,
silly little thing. Yeah. And, you know, so I could never go back to that gig. Like, you don't make any money. You know what I mean? Like, I was making $50,000 a year. Like, you know, yeah, it was Western Massachusetts, but like, that's literally nothing. And it's a tremendous amount of work. Like, it's, and yeah, all of a sudden, like I personally can't stand cancel culture. I just think it's like the, you know, the sign of the end of the Roman Empire.
Yeah, I think it's one of the worst things that is going on right now.
Yeah, like if there's
not good.
If there's a barbarians at the gates of the United States, I think it's cancel culture. And
is that because of like the threat to like speech and conversation and like and finding truth?
I think so. It's like and
it's like under threat, word, right? Like truth, finding truth is under threat.
Like I can't actually express my perception of reality in the way that I would choose to, because now all of a sudden someone might take offense to it, and they're like that tiny squeaky wheel. It's not just getting the grease, it's like canceling the rest of the car. You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden, like the motor is offending the squeaky part of the wheel. And now it's like, the motor's going to have to be shut down regardless of consequences. So, and I do think that universities are probably the epicenter of cancel culture, and like, you know, whatever it is that sort of feeds into that. And look, like it's interesting, because I do think if you take a look at the big picture of the world, like humans in the world, it's probably much better to live now compared to 200 years ago, you know? And it was probably much better to live 200 years ago compared to 500 years before that, and on and on and on. And I do think that there's like this evolution of like, hey, we don't have slaves anymore. That's a really good thing. You know, people aren't just going around on crusades and like roaming into the Middle East and like raping and pillaging, you know.
Right. That's like, not like standard practice anymore.
Right. You know, there's a lot of things that like if you were to go back in time would be just horrifying.
Dude, we basically eliminated like famine. Like we made calories really cheap.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, even the homeless people that I see around New York, like they're fed.
Right.
Like everybody's fed. Might not necessarily be like healthy, but they have calories now. And that used to not be the case. Like there was literally like a shortage of food.
Yeah.
People were eating boots and stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, like we're pretty, like, I mean, it's a funny
there.
time to talk about it because COVID's, you know, recency, but like famine, plague, and war are a bit of things that are a little bit more outdated.
Yeah.
They
it's
are
not as common.
But it's, you know, I think that we have this currently, like there's the overreactions to things are so powerful. And it's hard, like even on an individual level, people overreact to situations. I'm an overreactor for sure. Like, you know, I'm an emotional person. My reactions can be big. And then with given enough time, I can kind of calibrate and reassess and sort of make more intelligent decisions and things like that. But I just think culturally we're so reactive and then reflective. You know, if you're going to be reactive, you better balance it with being reflective. And if we don't have the ability to be reflective, and it's almost like we have reactiveness, but then just criticism and being very critical on the reactive responses that people have, rather than like a thoughtful, reflective perspective on it.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking of this like balance between stress and sensitivity. And like the higher the stress, the lower the sensitivity. The lower the stress, the higher the sensitivity. And in our overall state, like there's not a lot of stress. There's not a lot of war, famine, like
pestilence.
Yeah. Right. There's not a lot of the classic problems of humanity. But we're way more sensitive to like any problem that could come by.
I like that sensitivity and stress. I mean, it's very training
like
related.
even in training, right? Like it works like in the broad, but it also works in like the individual. Just in training, when you're exposing yourself to high levels of stress, you're just less sensitive.
Yeah. What do you feel during a 1 rep max back squat? Like,
you don't. The stress is too high.
It either moves, like I don't know what's moving this thing, or it doesn't, and you don't know why it didn't go,
right?
Other than the fact that it was like, like you just mechanically broke, you know.
But it's almost like this like fundamental effect, like in us, a force of nature, or maybe like or some sort of balance, some sort of math equation that's like happening. Yeah,
that's really interesting to think about,
right?
Because overall life is not that hard for most people, and it's like I go out of my way to build in artificial stress, you know, because like it's not like being forced upon me. It's not like I have to work on a railroad for 10 hours a day with a sledgehammer.
But I think that's why we're like all the three of us are so committed to bringing stress into our lives in ways that we can control and manage.
Yeah.
Like the type of stress that we want.
I'm usually looking for more of it.
Right? You know, I think we really value that. Like so much that we've committed our lives and our careers to like helping people bring that in ways that empowers them or makes them less sensitive. So they can just enjoy being more.
Right.
Well, it's like definitely like one of the things we always discuss is this X factor of like the things that you learn in the gym and how they kind of start to seep into other parts of your life. And that's like a huge part of it. Like if you can manage stress in the gym, if you can deal with heavy weight on your back or being out of breath or whatever, it's just something that like kind of carries over and gives you like kind of the tools to manage that, you know, regardless of the situation. So again, it's that push pull of like, I know how to manage this stress. So my sensitivity to like other shit is way lower.
Yeah, you know? Exactly.
I really do love this concept. Like, and I don't know, like, I feel like there's days where if I don't do anything, how difficult it is almost to like go to sleep at night. You know what I mean? Like I want to be tired so that I can relax and enjoy myself.
Yeah.
Otherwise it almost feels like there's just either something missing or like, you know, I'm kind of itchy to move. And I do think like just biologically, like there has to be these drives for you to want to do new things and to push the envelope. And I'm grateful for like my itchiness as a person, you know, like if you're not uncomfortable, you're not going to do anything. Like if you're comforted, like if like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, every single need is a check in that box. You don't need anything. You're not going to do anything. Why would you? You're satisfied. And so, you know, being unsatisfied is actually a gift, you know, like, because it's going to cause you to do something. Like, you know, I have kind of like if I explain my financial strategy of life to like any financial advisor, they'd probably think I was crazy, but I don't like to have a lot of money because I don't need to make more money. Right. You know what I mean? If I'm actually fiscally irresponsible, it forces me to keep working and solving for it. Like I refused to take any stimulus money because I needed to figure out how to survive in an unsurvivable financial environment of COVID where jobs are canceled and businesses are closed. And I had to solve for it with digital stuff. And as a result of that, like my financial path improved dramatically compared to pre-COVID. But it's a way of life for me. Like totally. I literally go out of my way to paint myself into corners so that I have to come out swinging to defeat whatever it is. And like I talked to my therapist about this, and she's like, well, this is a typical thing for children that lived in really bad environments, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, but dude, can't you see how I'm actually grateful for this? Like like
I think you're doing the same thing that a lot of really successful people do in a sense. Like Grant Cardone talks about this is like stay broke, spend your money though on yourself, like invest in yourself, like spend your money on things that are on your mission to be the person that you want to be. So like whatever you make, like reinvest it back into something that's going to help you be more, make more, become more, and constantly do that. Right? Like don't pile up this like stash of like money that you're never going to use. It's just going to stress you out and it's going to demotivate you.
Right.
Like use it as fuel, like keep lubricating, keep pushing things forward. And that's what we like, right? Like you can feed the beast of like taking whatever you make and like feed it into like more action, more of whatever it is that you're working toward. Then it feels great and it like multiplies. It grows exponentially. So like I think you're doing the right thing.
All right.
I think there's nothing. Don't let anybody tell you you're like you're off base there.
And
man.
I usually don't, because I can step back and be like, well, if I just objectively look at this, like things are actually improving.
Right.
And I'm listening to someone who is stagnant.
Right.
Tell me that I shouldn't do this and be more like them. And it's kind of like, that's like listening to someone that benches 135 tell you like, hey, I really know this secret path towards like muscle and strength.
Exactly.
It's like, I'm not sure about that, just because maybe you read something.
Yeah.
Like, I think I'm going to take the big guy's advice over yours, who's living it. And like,
dude, look, that's what Elon Musk does. Like he takes all the money he got from PayPal, he dumped it all into Tesla, SpaceX, and they were both like on the door of going bankrupt. And like the more he makes, like he just puts into other things. Like I don't think the Twitter thing panned out, but like that makes sense of like something he would do.
Right.
Like the money he makes, he buys something else that's like on his mission. You know, he doesn't just sit on it.
Yeah. Well, you can listen to the man with an opinion, or you can listen to the man with the experience.
Right.
Like, you know, like the man with the experience probably is the right person to listen to.
I feel like, you know, experience is getting like a bad rap these days too. You know what I mean? Like, I see this like a kind of a new trend of people where they're just like either like research or evidence-based and sort of saying like, you know, like your experience is almost meaningless. It's like this evidence is more important. And I think that that's such a foolish sort of a perspective to take. It's almost like, again, it's like this pendulum swinging too far in one direction or the other at any point in time. And like, yeah, like I guess that where I'm going with this is I'm more interested in the person who has failed and is still going than I am in the person who has been unblemished and kind of starting out on a good trajectory. Like I really value people who have had their teeth kicked in, and despite that are like still absolutely chipping away and living it and pushing forward from there.
Yeah, I went through this phase where I like was really kind of frustrated with science in general, because it gives us so much information on like the generalities, but it kind of cuts out the outliers of everything. And there's so much that we could figure out and learn if we just did more studying of the outliers of anything and studying the individual freak cases where like blank happened. Something is going on there.
Right.
But those cases tend to get eliminated from studies. They don't get investigated fully properly. And I think those are the keys to us pushing forward in really big ways, but they don't really fit in the classical way of doing science. I love science, appreciate science, but it's become sort of like a religion, and it has flaws. Like it isn't a perfect system. And it can't be applied to everything. You know, it works really well on things that are perfectly replicatable, really big scale, measurable things. But not like
it doesn't break through to new things usually. You know what I mean? It's sort of, I look at it like this, and you know, I know like all topics are fine on here. And like, this was like a, you know, I was doing an ayahuasca ceremony and like very strong visual of like how breakthrough.
I remember you talking about this in the Power Hour that we came to visit. Yeah.
And I look at it like you have a breakthrough performance, and then things like science are very useful for being able to analyze, like, why is this a breakthrough in some ways? You know, like, can I categorize it? Can I identify all the corresponding parts? And then you can apply that and use that stuff to try to, like, as a, for instance, like I really like, I still, you know, baseball was my primary sport, and I still follow a lot of like developmental baseball coaching and skill coaching and things like that. And nowadays in the major leagues, there's more guys that throw 99 than there ever have been before. You know what I mean? But no one today throws as hard as Nolan Ryan did in his prime. You know, like, so Nolan Ryan's like the freak of all freaks. It still like exists like out in the stratosphere compared to everybody else. Like literally because the only, like one of the differences is where they measure the velocity at with the ball. When Nolan Ryan was playing, they measured it as it was crossing home plate. Nowadays, they measure it exactly at hand release. And so if you were to measure Nolan Ryan at hand release, it's pretty simple, like physics and math. He would be hitting about 108 on modern radar guns, which is freaky. You know what I mean? Because like the hardest throwers nowadays, like Aroldis Chapman, I think, still has it at like 104.
Wow.
Like a 4 mile an hour difference is
big
freaky.
On the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge.
But still, most of the guys playing in the 80s, 90s, they would have been throwing 91, 92 on the modern guns. You know, so nowadays there are way more guys that are like in the, you know, the tiniest deviation below Nolan Ryan, you know? And there's just tons of them. And the reason is because they've analyzed like guys like Nolan Ryan and some of the mechanics associated with them, and they built coaching apparatuses and other techniques that duplicate their motions and that like repeat the ability to copy what he was doing. And so you breed these guys basically and build them so that you've got more guys that are almost exactly like him. And what I think happens is, previously it was like, here's the shape of the pyramid. It was like a big, like almost isosceles triangle, and you got Nolan Ryan so far ahead of everybody else. And then you almost squish the base of the pyramid up. And like you bring the masses like, so close. The peak didn't move, but the base compressed the middle. And now the base or the floor is so close to the top. It's like this action is just all taking place in this very small space. And I think eventually what happens is there's so much kinetic energy in this tiny space, something breaks through to reform a new pyramid. Yeah. And
what is that? So that's where, like, what did the ayahuasca tell you about that? Those breakthrough, that 4 minute mile, like that thing that just like changes everything.
Well, I think that it's just almost, I don't fully understand it. You know what I mean? It's almost like it's a visual. You know what I mean? First, it's like a visual concept where you're just like what am I watching? Because it's almost like, first of all, I felt like the plant was just showing me almost a movie. Like I was just like watching this visual explanation, not being spoken to me, but just like a silent movie or something almost. And then it's like left to me to interpret, like, what the fuck did I just watch here? Like what experience was just sort of like presented to me?
Were you watching an experience that you were having?
No, it just literally felt like I was just like watching something almost on a screen in front of me, or I was immersed in a room that was just visually displaying a concept to me. and not for really any purpose, like not like, hey, do something with this, just kind of like, hey, I'm going to tell you a story.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
This is a story.
Yeah.
This is something I'm aware of. Do with it what you will.
This is something that's happening.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
And then it was like, what did I just watch? Like, what the fuck was that? Like, and so it's kind of like, I think just visually I can appreciate that, like, that's my explanation is going back to something I understand, which is baseball, like some a priori concept of like, like,
were you able to make those connections after the experience?
Yeah, it wasn't like I was
like you're sort of able
to
bring it like into life, and then sort of it mixed, merged, applied, and gave some like context to like the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can see it in so many other areas, and some things it happens faster in, like less tangible or physical constructs. Like, you know, it's almost like I see it with strength and conditioning nowadays. Like powerlifting is actually a really good example. Like, you know, it's almost like they've figured out like so many elements that need to be present in training and execution of movement. There's so many people that do such freaky numbers nowadays. Like, and
it's insane.
It doesn't seem
possible.
No, it doesn't. But it's happening, and I just think like eventually it just like you get so much activity, and then one freak who it's like you brought the like I said, the floor comes so close to the ceiling, and then there's like all of the practices that are so effective for everyone. Like you apply it to the right anomaly, and then that displays itself ultimately as the next anomaly, which explodes and bursts through the
pull everything else up again.
Yes, it's and like then you have to study that.
Yeah.
And then it drags everything else up again.
And it's funny too how we like, you know, you talk about how Nolan Ryan like bred this whole way of like mimicking his throwing style, and coaches started coaching and teaching that way, and everyone started doing things like Nolan Ryan. We're such creatures of like of imitation and mimicking each other. And I think through my experience coaching, training people, like the most powerful tool is watching someone else do something, or just being around them, listening to them talk about the thing, watching them do the thing, watching because there's so much more to it than we think. It's not just like the form. It's the way that they think about what they are doing.
Right.
There's a dude that I follow on YouTube that I love, Mike Van Wyck. He's a Canadian huge bodybuilder, but I just love listening to him talk about training. Like he doesn't need to show me anything. I want to hear the words that he uses when he talks about like what his sets feel like, you know, where his mind's at. And I get value in the gym thinking about like the way he thinks about training. We rub off and affect each other way more than we give ourselves credit. And we're highly adaptable.
It's almost as if you can't see something until someone else saw it first.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or you can't like other people's perspectives or reality. Like, you know, I recently had a interview that I had Bill Hartman. I interviewed him and like, you know, he brought up this notion of like the truth, like what is it exactly? And like he was sort of alluding to this concept that it's something that's arrived at, and it's arrived at by gathering different perspectives on a topic. And ultimately you eventually over time see that there's a correspondence of most perspectives. Like they start to align and converge. And all of a sudden when like, pretty much everybody agrees, like that's what we're looking at.
That's when we get close to it.
Yeah. And sort of it's kind of this vetting process of like some people, it's like, you're out of your mind. Like, what are you talking about? Like, cause the rest of us see this thing, you know, whether or not, you know, but it becomes our truth, you know, like it's hard to ever know if this person over here, maybe they aren't out of their mind. Maybe they're the only one that's not in some ways. Like that to me is kind of the next question, but it is sort of like, we have a very hard ability to understand anything until someone breaks through and first understands it. You know,
and it's magic when that happens, when that person does that, when the forces are all aligned, and
it's just painful. Like I think about like, you know, I don't remember which book I was reading, but it was talking about the 3 most hated people potentially ever, you know, and it referenced Copernicus, Freud, and Darwin. And it was because they unearthed the centrality of the human from the universe.
Oh yeah,
more than anything else. And I was reminded of
People
it
don't
by
like
you
that.
talking about the horse of your subconscious earlier.
Yeah.
Where, Copernicus, I think it was Copernicus, but he had the heliocentric universe. And it's like, oh, you mean to tell me that the earth is not the center of the universe, the sun, but obviously that's not even close now. But it rocked us as a species, and we hated him for it. Dude. Because it's like, wait, you're telling us we're not the center of it all? Like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And then Freud saying, by the way, you're actually not the center of your own internal reality. Your subconscious is far more powerful than your conscious mind.
Right.
So it like dislodged us from thinking we're in control in the center of our own lives. And Darwin basically saying, by the way, like humans, we're not the center of like life. We're part of a process.
Or it wasn't God. It was
greater
this
than,
process of evolution.
Yeah, like you're just here's you are a leaf over here on this branch of this tree.
Yeah.
That's all you are. So we're not the center of the universe. We're not the center of life on this planet, which is not the center of the universe. And even in our own lives, our conscious controlling parts are not the center of ourselves.
Right.
So who are you? What are you? You dust speck that doesn't realize you're a dust speck, that's actually not even the commanding agent of your own dust speck.
But ultimately, what's
it's freeing though.
What's truthful about it too is the theories can still come together. Like the God theory can match up with the evolutionary theory. Mm-hmm. The spec theory and the self theory can also come together. There's ways. It's all the way that you perceive it and the way that you work through, the way you sort it out to yourself. That's where all the magic sort of happens.
Yeah,
is the way that you create the story about it. Like whether it's God or evolution, that's part of your story. It's happening. Whatever you want to call that, whatever you want to, however you want to imagine it. Like this process is happening. Maybe it's like that movie that you're watching, or not movie you were watching, the experience you were having on ayahuasca. Like it does make me think like this is all happening. Whatever you want to do to sort it out in your mind is up to you. Mm-hmm. It doesn't change the fact that it's happening. It doesn't change. Yeah, and you're part of it. You clearly have an impact on it.
Yeah.
Magical things are happening all the time in it. We are watching it happen and having a say in what happens in real time. Mm-hmm. So what do you make of that? Seems pretty powerful to me. It doesn't seem like just a speck with no control.
It's the coolest thing in the world because
perspective. Think of all the little organisms that make you up, like all the little cells that you are like this, God-like unimaginable force for them.
Yeah.
Right. And we're in the mix of it. So it just depends on how you want to look at it.
And I think that strength comes from the most unlikely of places. The real strength, to me, it is the rally in the darkness that can begin with a single drum beat that can be so faint. And if you can find it and identify it and isolate it and begin to come to life with it, then that rhythm picks up and it starts to hit louder and louder and louder. And that which was like a pebble dropping in a puddle can become a meteor in an ocean, which can become a planet moving through space, which can become an energy that is unimaginable. And it's all about being able to find it anywhere. And it's oftentimes like a tiny crystal in the dark. And if you can harness it and fuel it and see how far it can go, it's limitless.
I've never heard strength articulated that way, but it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah.
Like it starts with like the faintest, smallest thing, and then you sort of feed it, you coordinate it. It gets stronger. It comes together more. As you go, there's more and more harmony in the way that it all works and communicates and executes, and it builds and it grows. It's true.
It joins forces.
It's what happens in our bodies. It's what happens in our whole society. It's how we have been able to build amazing cities and control the environments that we live in. And
it's going to be fluid too.
Yeah.
Because it's all about kind of like taking turns with it and a spotlight that shifts and dances, you know? Because if it's one person's tune for too long, you start to tune it out.
Right.
And so you need one person to start it, and then you need them to kind of back off, and you need for it to get picked up by somebody else somewhere, and to kind of get into their tune for a little while. And that ability for it to become like a song and a symphony with a conductor that's able to parse it out and allow that. I just don't know who the conductor is. But as a player in it, I have to know when it's my time and when it's like time for me to back off.
Yeah.
And that shift and ability to like kind of get into somebody else's rhythm and like jam off of that is a big part to me.
It feels so good when you're in flow with things.
Yeah.
When you're playing your part, when you feel alignment with that.
So it's, to me, like, these are things that like, it's hard to articulate necessarily.
Well, these are we've been having these conversations for like 8-9 years since we've known each other. You know, that's why I've always loved talking to you, because you're able to zoom way out and then see the patterns in the small that apply to the big and the big that apply to the small. There's these weird things that like stem through like everything that we do.
But circling back around, this is all advocating for the action experience oriented thing. So like what you guys are saying is like science is almost like the lagging indicator. You kind of look back at it and like, oh, this is what this proved. But it's the experience that really pushes that top of that triangle forward.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Like, and I do think that the way that science works, where it collects and catalogs and sort of gets at the underlying reasons why, is so important to understand. Important. You know what I mean? It streamlines the process because it's like every generation comes up and like we all go through these waves of timelines. You know what I mean? Like we're all going to be young and restless and like feel itchy and like, oh, the time's mine. I got to make my impact. And you feel like you're reinventing the wheel in some ways, but like somebody before you invented the wheel. Like it's your turn to ride that wheel and to now take it somewhere else. You know, and it's time for the older people to let you have your time to be able to do that, and while still probably, you know, constraining you to some degree. It gives you something to push against in some ways. But it's kind of like, you know, I think that when you have a body of knowledge as a gigantic base to be able to push off of, like the bigger the base, the bigger the launch pad in some ways. And it's just like, are you aware of your base, or are you going to ignore all the gifts from the past that actually created this platform for you? You know, there's a lot of, like, I mean, I always try to think of myself, like, I believe in my training approach is so inside the box, it's not even funny. You know what I mean? Like anybody that thinks I'm an outside the box thinker when it comes to physical training, I'm just like, no. Like, I'm so far inside the box, it's not even funny. And I really do try to apply evidence as best I possibly can, and pretty meticulous with data and record keeping. And I think that's just learning from the past, like what's actually important. But it's kind of like, I think that I'm always going to push things as hard as I can, which is the ability to create that new spearhead where you might discover something new, but it's always kind of built off of something old.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, well, if you ignore the old, you're making your time horizon so much longer to learning.
That's exactly what it is.
Because now you have to relearn things that have already been kind of established, and why do that? But you do need to have the experiences to push the needle forward. Like, it's just a must.
Right.
It's cool to me that you're drawn to like the experience and like being the spearhead, because of everything that we're talking about that one anomaly, like you're doing that. You're doing that with yourself.
Yeah.
You're drawn to be that thing.
Yeah.
Right? Figure that out. Like find ways to poke through.
Right.
Right.
Like, how freaky can I get
I'm
be?
drawn to that too. I don't know why. I don't know, but there's something deep inside me that's like that really feels like I will be in unique positions and opportunities to figure those things out that no one else would have the ability to. And not because like there's anything special about me, but just I think it's probably true for most people. Probably all people, if they want to carry the torch, if they want to like approach life that way.
Yeah.
And imagine if everybody like approached it that way. Imagine the problems that we'd be attacking and solving if everybody took that responsibility of like, you have it within you to execute your own unique gifts and talents and like find an opportunity to like break through the limitations that we've all imagined society and people and that we all have to live by and find a new way to pull everybody else up.
It's,
that's what we could be doing. Right? Like, it's cool to think like that's
it's so
a possibility.
Hard to do that. You know what I mean? Like,
I know.
It's like the gravity of your own history. Like, because we all have like, we're living in the current day that we're in right now as adults, but you also have this like superimposed reality of your past that's like guiding you at the same time. Like, your entire early life experience is just like somehow sort of like, it's literally like you're living in two realities at the same time, because everything you're currently experiencing, you're comparing to your previous understanding of the world. And
even it's built on the genetics of your ancestors.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even your experience. It's like your parents and your grandparents and like the information that has been passed to you at this particular point.
So it's always like, you have, like you said, sort of like your genetic makeup that is way more responsible for your behaviors and your thoughts and your personality than we like to give it credit for. And like, I read the book called The Gene by Siddhartha Mukherjee, and it's just fantastic. You know what I mean? Like, it gets into a lot of like the twins separated at birth sort of a thing too. And like, but all the research on like, anyways, it's like people that were identical twins separated at birth, like they oftentimes marry people that have the exact same name, or like name their pets the same names. Like, they're living in like different countries and like both of them have a dog named Murray or something like that. And like tell the same bad jokes and like, work in the same profession. And it's just like, how is this possible? And I'll tell you the other thing, like after you've had children and you see like you're like, I don't think you picked that up from me. Like, it's hard to know when they picked it up from you, and like the weird, because you're like, hear them repeat things and you're like, oh, I do say that. Like, that's messed up. Like, oh, geez, like it's a weird mirror. But then there's other things where it's like, I just learned something about my genetics based, like my son's 2, and we got like their first parent teacher thing. And it literally felt like the lady was like reading me like a psychological profile of myself. And I was like, oh God, like, oh my God, like this is like, no one's ever described me quite so accurately, having never met me.
Through
like,
your 2-year-old.
Yeah. It was just kind of crazy, but.
Well, it's an interesting way to live your life, imagining that like, okay, like maybe this is what's happening and I'm watching the show, just like you had in that experience. Like, what's really happening here is like, I'm actually not really in charge. Like, that's kind of like a story that I made up. What's really happening here is like, I'm watching what is happening. I'm watching what Pat's going to do. I'm watching what Kyle's going to do here, and seeing how it all unfolds.
We are like kind of these archetypes of of humans, you know, like it was interesting. I was just thinking about like, you know, my job at this point is I kind of teach seminars and I sell online products, and there's like been many people in the fitness industry that have done similar things. And I'm like, I might just be another variant of this kind of a guy. You know what I mean? And like, let me think about those kinds of guys and like the pros and cons of those kinds of guys. And I don't know if there's anything I can do to stop myself from just being another one of these kinds of guys, you know, but like, what version of this do I really want to be?
Yeah.
Like, you know, I one of my worst experiences was at a Charles Poliquin seminar where he just made me feel so small and insignificant and shitty in this moment of time. And I was just like, oh, and I was like, well, you know, cause he's sort of like one of the originators of being that kind of a guy.
And he has a reputation of doing that to people.
Sure. But it doesn't diminish all the positives that you know what I mean? No. Like, it's just like that was, but I don't want to create that experience for anybody that I would ultimately have at a thing that I'm teaching or doing or creating. And so it's like, well, you are sort of like cast in this mold, and you should probably be a good one of these.
Yeah.
In some ways, you know,
you may be able to steer the ship.
Yeah.
Right. A little bit. Like maybe we're watching this movie, but like maybe we have little bits of like input in there that we can like tilt, especially like, you know, you just steer the ship just a little bit and like see how it changes over the course of like 10 years, 20 years, like, or a lifetime. You can really like,
it's damage. Like, I have to reckon there's like certain elements that fit that archetype of person. Like there's going to be ego. There's going to be like a tenacity. There's going to be, you know, I feel it in myself, like a retribution element of myself, a vengeance mode that I don't like necessarily, but it's like, it's there. Like, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
Deny its existence and its presence? No, like that's part of probably what fuels me. You know, it's like that double-edged sword of like, this is just an attribute. And it can swing this way and get ugly. It can come back this way and be really good. It's like, in some ways, I think the loyalty I have towards people that I feel like are like ride or die with me, it's like, you want me on your ship if we're sailing in to do battle. You know, you don't want me if I feel like, you know, you sabotage me at some point, because I'll like never forget it ever. And like 30 years from now, I might be like, oh, here's my opportunity. I'm going to slit your throat, you know? And so it's like, well, but which of those do I want to do? Like, I want to be more on the side of just finding my people, you know, not everyone's going to be your people, and that's fine. They're just a different thing that I don't necessarily need to have. And but it's like, which do I want to focus on? You know, where do I want to take that? And so I just think that for everybody, like there's all you have are your attributes, and you're never going to escape those things. It's just, what do you want them to be pushed towards? You know, if you can cause I just feel like there's so much in old fables, you know, like the angel and the devil sitting on opposite shoulders. Where can you come to appreciate and recognize your devils and see your angels at the same time and know that they're both part of you at the same time? And like, don't try to deny any part of yourself.
Integrate.
Yeah. You know,
bring it together. It's who you are. Pat, I could talk to you all day. I could make this an 8-hour podcast easy.
But unfortunately, people have to push sleds and stuff.
Oh, people have to exercise in the gym. What are they thinking, man?
So till we do this again, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on, talking to us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And I hope to do it again soon.
Yeah, for sure. Part 2 coming up soon.
Stay tuned.